So if you've ever worked on a responsive website, then chances are you've come across media queries, but are you using them to their full potential? In this video, I'm going to give you a quick guide to the different features that we can use within media queries to make your websites more responsive. So for this example, I'm going to start us off with a div with a heading and a paragraph. Something nice and simple. And I've given it some basic styles, and we're going to be editing these dependent upon the screen size. So at the minute, when I lower the size of the screen to a width that's quite small, notice that our text and our box start to get very, very squashed. So what I would do is I would come in and I would write a media query, which we write using the keyword of @media, and this tells the browser that we are creating a media query. And then in brackets, we can provide some arguments. So for this one, I'm going to say max width, and we can say 600 pixels. So now anything in this argument results in less than 600 pixels, then this argument, anything within this style will take effect. So I'm just going to say div, and the color can be red. And that takes effect because currently the screen size is less than 600 pixels. So note that max width means this or less. Min width would mean this or more. So at that point, when I stretch the screen, we then get those styles to take effect. An important thing to remember is when we're creating these media queries, that the media queries should come after the default styles, because if we were to put them before the default styles, as you will see here, if I copy and paste this, notice that now those styles never take effect, because although we are meeting the criteria, our CSS is read in a downward direction. So the last thing that's declared, which is this div argument, that is what will take effect. It takes precedence over this. So that's the basic structure of a media query. So how can we use them more efficiently? Well, a more realistic example would be that with a max width of 600 pixels, perhaps we actually want our Perhaps though, what we really want is for our content to do something more like this. When we get to that smaller screen size, maybe the box should fill the space rather than only taking up half of it. Remember, if I take that out, then we get this very squashed look. So that's how we would use max width. We can also use min width, as I've already discussed, to get a very similar outcome. So instead we could say that a min width of 900 pixels, let's say, will give us a color of blue on our text. But then there's more that we can do than just checking sizes. We can actually check the orientation of our screen. So we can check whether our screen is currently in landscape or in portrait. And this basically means that if we're in landscape, it means that our screen is currently wider than it is tall. And if it's in portrait, then it's taller than it is wide. So I'm just going to uncomment this and you'll see that. So I've set this so that we have a background of yellow when our screen is in landscape. So once we hit this point here, we have a width that's higher than our height, but once we go back below, we lose that color because we are no longer in landscape. I'll just show you how that works in portrait as well. As you can imagine, it's just the opposite. So this way round, it's when we are in portrait, we get those styles, and when we are in landscape, we lose them. We can also group our media queries together in a way, so we can check for two things at once. So in this example here, we've got a min width of 400 pixels and a max width of 600 pixels, and I've used them together. Know that they are in brackets, and then the second argument is also in brackets. So when our styles meet both of these arguments, so it's got to be at least 400 pixels and no more than 600 pixels, so anywhere between those, we will get an underline on our text. So notice at this smaller size we have no text decoration. When I hit this size here, we gain that underline, and then as we get bigger again we lose it, because that's how we have it set to. It has to match both of these arguments. Just going to comment out these styles that I've already applied, just to make sure they don't contradict each other. And then we have something similar but different. For this example, we're using a comma separated list of arguments, and this works similarly to how you would write a comma separated list of identifiers within CSS normally to select multiple objects. So for this we have a media query that is checking whether we either have a min width of 800 pixels or our screen orientation is portrait. So you notice while we are in a portrait screen size, we have a we have a border that's 4 pixels solid and a colour of orange red. And as we get to the size where it's no longer in portrait, we're now getting towards a landscape size. We lose that border, but then when we hit the 800 pixel mark again, we get that border back because it matches one or the other. Whereas in the previous one we were looking for whether it matched this and this. And another important thing that we can do with media queries is we don't just have to check the size of our screen or the orientation of our screen. We can also check for what kind of media we are actually using. So I can only really show you the example for screen here, but we can, instead of saying max width, min width, we can just say media and then declare a type. And this doesn't have to be in brackets, this should be before your brackets. And you don't have to provide bracketed arguments, but I can say media screen and the colour of the text is red. And notice how that applies up here. But if I change this to print, then those styles aren't applied unless we are using a print medium. And the choices we have for our mediums are print, which is when you're printing an item out, screen, when it's being displayed on a screen, and speech, which is for screen readers.